Hello guys and gals and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be looking at the two-handed mace known as Overkill. Overkill can drop, of course, in World Tier 3 and World Tier 4 as Sacred and Ancestral. And the thing about the Ancestral version is that you really just kind of need that one. It's a weapon. So all of your damage pretty much comes from your weapon if you're using it to actually hit monsters with. And if you have a low-rolled overkill, it's not really going to do you very good. One thing that I'm going to tell you right off the bat is that if you're a high-level character, you cannot use a low-level weapon. All of your damage comes from the weapon. It's how that works. So when you're utilizing no weapon or your weapon is garbage, your attack power goes down because your attack power is tied to that weapon. And that means that if you're going to use this as a main hand weapon, you need one that's like 820, 810, something that's closer to a capped out weapon so that you're getting the optimal damage from it. Now, because it is a two-handed mace, it does have the overpower damage on it of 63%, which would make it good for an overpower build if you were going for that direction. We also have 14% physical damage, which does roll between 14 to 28. And these numbers do upgrade, by the way, when you actually upgrade the item. So when you get it to its maximum form, these effects are going to go up. We also have 54% overpower damage as well, which goes from 42 to 84%. So as you can see, we got 63 overpower on it, and then an additional 84% overpower. And of course, when you upgrade it, it's even more overpower damage. So this is definitely something that you would be using with an overpower build. I would definitely not use this unless you were going to do an overpower build. 48% damage to injured enemies, which does vary from 42 to 470%. Not my personal favorite metric, but it does work against some bosses and things like that when you're having trouble with them. But it's been my experience lately that unless you're fighting like Uber Lilith or something, which is really one of the only monsters that it really comes in handy for, most monsters tend to die in like seconds, which bosses anyway. So it's not quite as useful as it seems. We also have 22.5% critical strike chance, which is against injured enemies as well, which I don't even really know why it's so focused on injured enemies. But whenever you hit an injured enemy, it's going to hurt them a heck of a lot. 24% crit on that max, and it goes up with when you upgraded it. It's actually kind of ridiculous. That's a lot of extra crit. Now, the main thing about Death Blow, before we get into the actual effect, is that Death Blow is a skill that revolves around killing an enemy with one hit. That's the entire purpose of the ability. It also resets its cooldown if you kill the enemy. So if you actually kill an enemy, the cooldown will be reset. Now, you can get 100% increased damage to bosses with Death Blow, and on top of that, you also get the Death Blow makes you berserk, or you can go with the Death Blow damage at least on one enemy, you gain 20 fury. Now, if you're going to build Death Blow, you're either going to do one of two things, okay? You're either going to use it for utility, which if you use Death Blow for utility, then it's things like giving you berserking, or maybe just giving you fury generation, or whatever it may be. You're not potentially using it for its damage output so much as using it just for its utility, right? And then there's using Death Blow for its actual damage output. Now, using it for its actual damage output is a whole other thing. And if you were going to build in a Death Blow, Barbarian, this could be a good option. But there's also some argument to be made that you don't necessarily get the best use out of it from this particular weapon, and you might be better off just finding a nice 820 two-handed mace and putting a nice legendary affix on it. And that's one of the really big downsides of this, is that it takes away that two-handed legendary affix. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, when you have a two-handed weapon, you can put a legendary affix on it and get a double effect from it. So if I wanted to get, like, for instance, basic skills gain 60% attack speed, that's a pretty huge amount of attack speed for my basic skills. Or I can get something, like 40% increased damage, when I have maximum available resource or whatever may have you. Which could be an interesting build for Overkill, because this particular effect will work well with Death Blow, because Death Blow is a cooldown, not an ability that generates, or that it costs fury. So you can basically spam it if you do it right. And that's kind of what the legendary effect is on this. So let's go over that. So Death Blow creates a shockwave dealing 24 to 38% damage of its base damage to enemies. Enemies who die to this effect also reset Death Blow's cooldown. Now the entire thing behind Death Blow is resetting the cooldown. If you can't reset the cooldown, then it's no use. Right? That's basically how this ability works. So if I go up and I hit a monster, and the monster doesn't die, then now I have to wait 12.89 seconds before the cooldown comes back up again, and that's no fun. So if you're going to build a Death Blow Barbarian, the thing is that you have to kill the monsters with each hit. And this means that it's not particularly effective versus bosses. But as you can see here, I managed to kill something, right? So it reset. I managed to kill something, so it reset. I managed to kill something, so it reset. I managed to kill something, so it reset. And it continues this way. As long as you manage to kill something, it's going to reset over and over again. And this is one of the things that the shockwave is giving you that is very interesting. So the shockwave is not about the damage that it's creating. The shockwave is actually about the fact that it kills things that are behind the target that you're hitting. So let's say you're fighting an elite, a big boss monster that you know you're not going to kill in one hit. And the shockwave travels backwards and kills some of the lesser monsters. You know, like even maybe just a bunny rabbit that happened to be walking by. As long as it kills something, it can reset. And that's what it says here. Enemies who die to the effect of the Death Blow shockwave will also reset Death Blow's cooldown. So basically what this allows you to do is it allows you to spam Death Blow over and over and over again. So if you were to use Overkill as your main weapon, the purpose of using Overkill as your main weapon is to create Death Blow as a skill that you can spam over and over again. Now, as you can see, I failed to kill a monster, and now my Death Blow cooldown, I have to wait for the entire thing to come back up. So, in this particular case, I was unable to kill a monster. Now, it occurs to me that this particular ability is not going to be super duper ridiculously useful against really tough monsters. And the reason why is because, well, if it is on a 12-second cooldown, and you can't one-shot bosses, obviously, so during boss fights, it's going to be relatively useless. Against trash mobs, it's going to be pretty amazing. So when you find a big group of trash mobs and you start utilizing your Death Blow, you're going to notice that it's just going to dish out a ton of damage, right, to the trash mob. You're going to be able to spam it multiple times, which is certainly interesting because it just allows you to just spam that ability over and over and over again, which makes it a very interesting utility option just simply for the berserking effect, because it allows you to basically stack berserking really easily, especially if you're getting multiple kills. So as long as you're getting kills with it, you can stack berserking over and over and over again. Now, in this particular case, I was unable to get the berserk or the reset because the damage reduction monsters were in the mix. So Death Blow was unable to get a kill. But in this particular case, I got a kill. So as you can see, well, nice 73, and it resets. If you build it properly, I can see Overkill becoming an interesting option for, say, leveling or EXPing or killing trash mobs. Like, in general, I think it would work really well in dungeons with large amounts of weak monsters that could be taken advantage of. However, I also feel like it's one of those items that kind of like falls short when you're actually dealing with anything tough. The shockwave isn't going to kill an elite monster or a boss. It's not going to do any significant damage to the elite monster or the boss either. And when the boss or the elite monster is the only thing left, you're not going to be able to rely on this effect to give you a huge amount of bonus. In fact, if I were a Death Blow Barbarian, I would probably have two maces, in my opinion. I would probably have one that is set up for bosses specifically, and then I would probably have another that is set up for trash mobs. The Overkill would be my trash mob general farming weapon, because the ability to reset the cooldown on the shockwave is actually pretty nice, because it hits like everything behind the monster, and there's a very good chance it will reset the cooldown, which means you can spam it again, which means you can keep spamming it, and being able to spam it multiple times just means tons and tons and tons of hits, which could potentially be tons and tons of damage. I'm not exactly sure how much damage you can dish out with Death Blow in its maximum, because I haven't really gone that far to mess around with like the full damage output of it. But I mean, even if I just pull out some points real quick here, and I just throw them in there, just for the sake of argument, let's just grab some points real quick. The maximum that I can get it to right now is 16k on its top end, and of course you can get more plus to skills than that. If you manage to get it high enough, I imagine you'd probably be able to one-shot a lot of stuff, and reset the cooldown repeatedly over and over and over again. And I think that's really what it comes down to with this ability. Is it really comes down to, can you reset the cooldown reliably? And if you can reset the cooldown reliably, then it could be very interesting as an ability for your character. Also to give you basically free berserking. But it can also be useful as a utility skill, just to give yourself fury every now and then, so it depends on how you want to set it up. Personally, I don't think I'm going to be using it anytime soon, and even if I did set up a Death Blow Barbarian, I might not use Overkill. The mods on it are just really bad. I don't really particularly like building overpower damage unless I have a guaranteed overpower. There are some characters that do have guaranteed overpowers, by the way. And as far as I know, Death Blow is, I mean, I can't remember if Death Blow does have a way to become a guaranteed overpower, but it doesn't have one on the skill itself. I'd have to take a look at the aspects and check that out. But I'm also not enthused with the injured enemy modifiers. I guess technically the injured enemy modifiers can make sure that you get your kills to reset your cooldown, which is probably what they're thinking. But my personal take is I would rather prefer things that are going to help me with the damage that I actually have, like vulnerable damage, you know, like damage versus a bleeding enemy, you know, like a critical strike damage versus crowd controls, strength. That's one of the things that's just straight up missing off of here is strength. Like, I feel like that's kind of like a big miss for a lot of these, is that like they're class specific items. Why don't they have like, you know, like I guess technically the class stat, so to speak, which is kind of what you're looking at for a lot of classes, is like, why doesn't it have the class stat? Some of these uniques do have like all stats and things on them, but a lot of them will have like something completely different than what you would expect on them for what you're trying to build. I'm not really sure how I feel about this particular item. Like, I feel like it does do what it's trying to do, which is to reset the cooldown. The Death Blow does help reset the cooldown. But then again, the Death Blow only helps reset the cooldown on trash mobs. It does have some flavor text here. It says, the malformed snake creatures that live in the swamps are not content with simply killing their prey. They seem to take a malicious pleasure from inflicting as much suffering as possible before death. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when I'm overkilling it. And as always, keep watching.